As Roy mentioned earlier, after services, I will be taking any advice because my life changes tomorrow because I will have a teenager. So from what I've understand or heard for many years, they're the toughest agers to deal with. So um, I'll take any good advice for how to deal with that for the next 7 years. So anyway, as I was thinking of what to talk about to us evening, I started thinking that I'd done the Lord's Supper last week, and looking at what can we get from that. So I came up with this idea of what do you need, or what does every Christian need? What does a Christian need in today's time? And I wanted to start with a question. What do you need most right now as a follower of Jesus? Some of you might say more time. Obviously, that's an easy one. Others might say peace, strength, direction. Maybe you feel kind of dry spiritually. Maybe you're worn out. But the truth is, we all carry needs into daily lives, and while those needs may look different on the surface, underneath them all are some shared, deep, spiritual needs that every Christian kind of carries. Core needs, and these needs of the heart and soul that God meets through Jesus. We find them in the verses that Jimmy read earlier. These are 1 Corinthians 11, verses 23 through 26, and it goes. Look at these through the Lord's Supper. All these needs come up that kind of you can use to help guide you as a Christian, and what you just need to do to help stay closer to Jesus and so forth. Now, as I said, the verses there, and I'll go ahead and read them again. 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26. For I received from the Lord that I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, also he took the cup after supper, saying, This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So the first topic we're going to talk about here is we need to remember. All right. In those verses, it says, "Do this in remembrance of me." We live in a world that is full of distractions. There's distractions all over the place constantly. You can be distracted for 30 seconds and then realize it's been an hour. There's just constant information and endless options. And in the middle of all that noise, it's easy to forget the important things, the things you need to be focused on, the things that are important, what Jesus has done for us and who we are in him. Now, we all know, it's impossible to constantly be thinking about what Jesus has done for you every second of the day. You have to actually do things, but we get distracted a lot, and those things become more important. In Psalm 77, verses 11 and 12, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. We need to remember God's faithfulness to fuel our present faith. All right, been there always for us, but sometimes we kind of forget that, or it kind of goes in the back of our head. I was reading once that a soldier once said the most powerful moment of his deployment wasn't combat, but a letter from home. And for that, it reminded him what he was fighting for. He reminded him why he was there. And that same concept is similar to a Christian. We have all these moments But the most powerful moment might just be us realizing that Jesus came to the cross for us and remind us of why we believe and why and who we belong to. We this is a tough thing to speak of because it happens a lot and happens often. I think about times when you've been at a funeral of a friend or a family member. The room is very heavy with grief and so forth, and we've been there. And the song comes up, Because He Lives, and then all of a sudden the atmosphere or things kind of change a little bit, and because that moment reminds us, it gives us that remembrance that what Jesus did. He conquered death for us, and it really hits home and kind of gives us that perspective back. So how do we apply this? Well, you don't need to earn your place in God's family. You need to remember that through Christ, you already have it. You have to stay faithful and so forth, and take time regularly to reflect on the gospel. Write it down, talk about it. Preach it till you got it in your heart, purely. And again, we have those moments in life where we are distracted, and it's impossible to think about that constantly. But we need to be willing and ready to remember that. Our next thing that we need as Christians is we need to proclaim. And that, again, is a direct word from the Lord's Supper there. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes. We need to speak the truth of Jesus, all right, to ourselves, to one another, and to the world around us, the watching world. As we're here now, people outside aren't really watching us, but that's the big test, is when we go outside, people are watching you. We need to hear it again and again. Every Sunday we come to church, you need to hear it again. And sometimes, I'm guilty of this too, you think, well, I've heard this before. That's okay. You can hear it again. It might actually hit a different tune there. In John 6, verses 35, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. This, really gets me thinking about memories. And as you get older, and I'm guilty of it too. Memories become kind of bits and pieces. You don't have it all there. You forget about this part, or you remember that part, or you start talking to somebody, and then you start remembering the other parts. And I've been in those conversations where this person starts talking. I'm like, I don't really remember this, but then it starts coming back. And oh yeah, this happened and this happened, and it's very typical of people as they get older. You kind of forget about things. All right, I've seen people on their computer desk, they have these Post-it notes, everywhere. And you walk in there and you're like, what does all this mean? What is it? Well, I got this here at this time. I got this I got to remember about. I was talking to somebody recently. They'd bought a business, and they were coming in there cleaning it up, and they said that there were just Post-it notes everywhere. They had no idea, just about everything you can think of. Post-it note here, there, everywhere. Doctor appointment at 2, whatever it could be, it was everywhere. And you're thinking, well, it's hard to keep up with stuff. And the same thing applies to thinking about Jesus, making that proclamation. Would it be crazy to have a Post-it note? I think I remember somebody telling me about this, having a Post-it note on your dashboard says, I believe in Jesus. And you got in the car and you saw that Post-it note. You said that I believe in Jesus. You're proclaiming that. You're saying, hey, this is something I believe in. Have you ever, been nervous or anxious about something? Of course you have. We all have. Maybe, you got this tough decision you got to make. You don't know what to do. You kind of just can't figure it out. I was talking to my brother. He's a man of authority. I'll say that. Well, he has a job that he hires and fires people. I don't have to do any of that. I just, I can't fire any of the kids, but they come in there and I can't send them home. Sorry, but he has that responsibility. He has people who work for him, and he was having a big issue. He was kind of mulling over having to deal with a coworker or a worker, and he said he finally all right, this is what I'm going to do. and he called him up and demoted him or whatever. But once he'd done that, that anxiety, once he made his decision, this is what I'm doing, or proclaimed his decision, the anxiety went away. It was done with. And sometimes that's what we need as Christians, is we need to make that proclamation. And when we do that, that should relieve some of that stress. Is this is the path I'm on. We need to learn how to speak that truth into our anxiety or shame or doubts. The gospel isn't just salvation; it's everyday proclamation you can make. And your heart needs this, not only for yourself but for your family and your neighbors, so they see that as well. The next thing we need, and we need this a lot, is fellowship. All right, 1 John chapter 1 verse 7. But if we walk in the light, we have fellowship with one another. We were not created to follow Jesus alone. It wasn't just created for one person to follow Jesus. There is a community. A community is needed to follow Jesus. Even Jesus, on the night of he was betrayed, surrounded himself with his closest friends. And he broke bread with them, knowing what was going to happen. He invited them, into his suffering, and that's where this fellowship really kind of goes for, or leads us to, is tragedy strikes. You need that fellowship. We've probably all been there when something bad has happened. On the way leaving Danville earlier today, there was a motorcycle had wrecked, and people were stopping, people were helping, and I don't know any of the details to any of that kind of stuff, but those, I don't think it was any kind of tragedy, but things happen instantly without you thinking, and those things, if you don't have that fellowship or those friendships around, it's really hard. And really, when I think of fellowship, I think of friendship. These are friendships you are making, and they're going to be different from other friendships you have, but you still need those friendships. And when those things get rough and those things get bad, you think you might want to be alone, and that's okay. But oftentimes those friendships and that fellowship will help you through that loss, or help you get over that time to get you to a better place, so you don't lose that faith. Like I said, fellowship is socializing, carrying each other's burdens, and that's where we get really more into building those friendships. Is you're not at it alone. It really encourages encouragement and confession. Having somebody there to speak to when it comes to friendship. Next, we have is discernment. Christians need discernment. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 28 and 29, it says, "Let a person examine himself." And then on it says, "discerning the body." We live in a world where the truth can be a bit blurry. Discernment is the ability to see clearly through the fog, to know what is of God and what isn't. It starts with self-examination. Am I walking in the step with Christ? Am I holding on to sin? Am I drifting through? And the real life thing that comes to me when it comes to discernment, and seeing clearly, is back when I was in high school. I had a friend, and he had a girlfriend, and they had been dating for a while, and they fought all the time. It was every little thing they were fighting about, and they dated for a long time, and they fought for a long time dating each other. And he would ask stuff all the time, talk to me. I just love her, and I'm like, do you really? Because it doesn't seem like there's any love going on here. And it was they would fight over the littlest things to the biggest things, and it never seemed to stop. And I did not understand why they did it. To me, it seemed clear that they were not a good matchup together. But for whatever reason, they did not see that reality. Eventually, they had a kid, which made it even worse. They fought even more. They are not together now. I think they might have had two or three more kids. But they did not go well together at all. And I don't understand. I don't know. Maybe it's not my place to examine it, but it just did not make any sense to me. And you think, what did they need? What could have maybe made them get along better? Were they not communicating? Were they not talking to each other? Did they not? Maybe they weren't. Maybe they weren't good Christians, and they didn't go to church. Maybe that was the holdup. I don't know. But they should have prayed on it a little bit. I can't. I can't speak for them. But that's the thing. When we have these, or when we go through life, sometimes we want that clarity. And if we're not seeking that clarity, we're not going to find it. How many of us have ever had an opportunity come up that we really, really were itching to accept, and we, this new job maybe came up, and we were like, "Yep, that's it. I'm doing it." And you took that job, and then it turned out to not so good. The old saying, the grass is not greener on the other side. And kind of like, well, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't have done that so quickly. And then on the other hand, you have these times where, I've had people say, hey, what you going to change jobs? What are you thinking about moving? And they said, I'm going to go pray on it. And that is about the most wisest thing I've heard people say about big decisions in their life. I'm gonna go pray on it. I'm gonna give it a few days and so forth. There was times I was in interviewing committees, and we wanted to hire this person, and we called them and said, hey, you got the job, and they were excited, and we're like, well, do you accept? And I'm like, well, I'm gonna talk to my family. We're gonna pray about it, and I'll let you know in a day or two. And in the most cases, they talked about it, and they ended up joining the team or getting hired, and it was great. Here recently, I switched to schools. I went from Crab Orchard to Stanford. And I was thinking, that was like a 3-month decision. First was, would I want to do it? Then it was, is it a possibility? And then it was, is this something good for the family and all that kind of stuff? And do I want to drive 20 minutes instead of 10? Those are all decisions that you kind of mull over, and you think about them, and you pray on them, and you eventually, if it's the right decision, you act on it. And I know it's kind of crazy, and to say that, but sometimes you just have that feeling that it's the right decision. And I often feel like when you're patient, you pray on it and you discuss it, then that feeling's it's going to come if it's the right decision. But discernment comes through prayer, scripture, and wise counsel. Sometimes we do need to slow down and seek God before we make those big decisions. Examining your heart and kind of realizing what you need instead of just drifting through. The next thing that we need, or that every Christian needs, is nourishment. All right. In Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 and 2, come everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. The Christian life is not lived by willpower alone. We need spiritual nourishment. We are drained, throughout our days, throughout our lives, with stress, sorrow, temptation, busyness. But God offers us, daily bread or daily nourishment if we're willing to take it. In life, or things I've experienced, many of students throughout my career, that is just awful. I don't even know where to start. I try to think of a situation, and I got about 100. And for some, that school becomes their sanctuary. That's where they get their nourishment. That's where they thrive. And they have trouble at home. Maybe their parents aren't too supportive, or maybe they don't even live with their parents. They are in foster care, those sorts of things. But students come to school, conversation we have often as teachers, man, if they just had 2 strong parents, or if they just had some parents, if they just had some support, this kid would be be shooting out of the roof. They'd be so strong. And then you get those kids who they don't have hardly anything, and they do great at school, but that's their nourishment. They come to school, that's what they want. It's amazing what kids can do with support, and when they get the nourishment they need, and spiritually as well. We have many kids that and this is good. I had a kid this past year. And I mean, he would go at recess and he would bring his Bible and he would preach to other kids. His messaging, how good it was, but they would have a church at recess, and it was great. But kids need that spiritual or that nourishment, and the same goes for us spiritually. We need that spiritual nourishment. We can't do it alone. We can't do it without help. We walk this world on our own and shun everything and that spiritual nourishment to help us improve our spirituality and our connection with God. So I ask, where do you get your nourishment at? Do you read the Bible daily? Is it coming to church? Are you in God's word regular? I guess. Are you worshiping? Going. It doesn't always happen Sunday morning, and I on my phone, it gives me those alerts, Bible alerts, notifications. It gives you a Bible, a scripture a day to read. It's something good. I don't always get to read it, but it's always there. So just need that nourishment though to help restore our soul. The next thing that Christians need is hope, or the sixth thing, hope. In Revelations 19:9, it says, "Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb." Paul reminds us in 1 Corinthians 11:26 that we proclaim Christ's death until he comes. And hope, that means we live with hope. And sometimes when you try to think of hope, that it's kind of this hope that this broken world isn't the end of the story. That hope that Christ is returning, hope that one day everything wrong will be made right. That's a hope that we have. And sometimes defining hope can be a little hard. You're talking, well, I hope that my kids, become good people. It's like, what are we hoping? Is it hope or is it a wish? I wish this happened in the future. It's tough. So it's sometimes hard to kind of determine what hope is. But I'll say it this way, or give an example. It's been a while, but you all may or may not remember the dog we got. We got us a new dog back Thanksgiving. Kind of a stray showed up, and we took it in, got it all taken care of, pet wise or vet wise, and it's a really good dog. Spring came though, however, the dog ran off. Gone for a while, and Maxim was he's like, why would my dog leave? It was rough, and he kind of was sad, and I kept telling him, well, maybe she'll come back. She'll come back. Let's have some hope. Let's hope that she'll come back. And sure enough, after about a month, she came back. I don't know exactly where she went, what she did. She came back. She looked pretty starved, so we fed her and took care of her. Things were good. And then she left again. So I don't know. She was gone a little longer. And then she came back, and then this time she came back. She stayed for a good month, but she's gone again. So I don't know really where the dog is going, but every time she comes back, she's pretty worn. It's actually a pretty good metaphor for the prodigal son as well, because she keeps leaving and coming back beaten, worn. And we feed her, and she gets back up and hangs out for a good while and then leaves again. But that hope that he had at the beginning, that my dog's going to come back. I hope she comes back. She's going to come back. And I asked him, what is it that keeps us going? What keeps you with that hope? What that same principle applies? What keeps that hope for Christ and the hope for the Lord that keeps you going? Christians, hope isn't wishful thinking. It's anchored on the promise of God. So we don't give up. The best is yet to come, and that hope should keep us strong and keep us faithful. So to wrap things up, what do we really need as Christians? Well, we need to remember who Jesus is and what he's done. 2, We need to proclaim truth over our lives. We need to fellowship that strength. We need fellowship that strengthens us. We need to discern what is good and true. We need nourishment for our souls, and we need hope that looks forward to the return of Christ. The church, the beautiful truth is that Jesus meets every one of these needs, and that should satisfy us. Those are the things we need, and in the lump sum is we need Jesus. All right, we need to stay focused and true to Jesus's word. So don't leave today thinking that you do need more. Leave today trusting that one who's already trusting in the one that has already done it all. The one that we need. If you have any concerns, you have been faithful, or you want to make a decision tonight, is just as good a time as any. So if you have any concerns, now's the time to come forward as we stand and as we sing.